Well, personally, I saw the resident coordinator function both as a challenge as well as an opportunity. As a challenge because the resident coordinator wears so many different hats. She or he is, in addition to being the RC, is also the designated official for security, the humanitarian coordinator in most cases, as well as the UNDP resident representative. And the task is extremely complex. It's a high level of responsibility and accountability without necessarily the commensurate amount of resources that are available. The RC also has to balance a number of often competing interests. But at the same time, I really saw this as an opportunity because I think it was a chance to get out of the institutional box, if you will, and to be able to think strategically across a diverse range of issues, and to be able to leverage the resources of the system as a whole rather than just from one agency. And I think for me, a key factor was to be able to be part of a process and to lead a process where we can actually maximize our efficiency as the UN, but also enhance our impact to deliver as one. And I think that to me was the primary motivation. I think what has been most rewarding for me has been to see where the UN has actually had an impact on the ground and has been able to make a difference in the lives of the people in the countries that we serve, in my case being Uzbekistan. And I think in Uzbekistan, our success as the UN, if you will, has really been at the community levels where we've been able to demonstrate some very tangible results, which I think is a tremendous source of pride for all of us in the UN family. In Karkal, Pakistan, for example, which is one of the poorest regions of Uzbekistan, the UN system has actually got together to work with national counterparts on a range of community development initiatives, and this includes providing services, essential services for communities. It involves integrating ICT into secondary schools. It involves community development planning and so on. I should mention that tuberculosis poses a threat to the people in Karkal, Pakistan, and there we are actually working very closely with our counterparts, encouraging a focus on volunteerism to address issues related to ending the scourge of TB, and this includes a number of awareness raising activities, advocacy activities, providing prevention and treatment services and so on. We are also working with our national counterparts in implementing an emergency response in 3 regions in Uzbekistan as a result of an outbreak of HIV infections amongst children in hospitals. And we've been working with civil society and government partners and actually building up their capacities, providing technical assistance, policy advice and so on to be able to deal with this issue. And as a result of this, the number of infections have been controlled, and very importantly, the awareness of healthcare professionals has actually increased. And coming really to the more macro level, if you will, in May of this year, the government organized a conference on the financial crisis. The purpose was to really promote its anti-crisis program and strategy. And I think this was a good example where we as the UN joined forces to actually shape the dialogue and the discussions and the outcome of that particular conference, and very importantly to shape the government response to the crisis. And finally, if you will, just a few words on the UN Development Assistance Framework, the UNDAF, which we signed this year. You know, there has been a long and very intense process of consultation in the formulating of this particular UNDAF. And I have personally been struck by the very high level of commitment, enthusiasm and passion that has been displayed by our staff as well as our national counterparts. And it has really been a very, very intense and very exciting exercise. And of course now the challenge is going to be in getting the same level of enthusiasm and support in the implementation of the UNDEF. Well, the UN here in Uzbekistan is currently facing a number of operational challenges, which is in a sense slowing down the implementation of our programs. And what we have been doing is to try and address this through a number of means. The first is we have been using the UN country team as a platform to actually analyze some of the causes of these challenges and to try and agree on some common approaches to try and address these issues. We have also been leveraging the expertise of the UN agencies on the ground, but as well as at regional and headquarters levels to help us to try and address this issue. And you know, if you ask me whether we have succeeded, I cannot say that we have succeeded, but what I can say is that we have started a very constructive dialogue with all concerned, and we have established the necessary foundation through which we can go ahead with the resolution of these problems. Another challenge that I could speak to is with regards to HIV/AIDS. Now, universal access to HIV services is the cornerstone of what we do at the UN, and it is also very much reflected in the government policies and strategy documents on HIV/AIDS. But the reality is that most at-risk populations' access to essential services tends to be limited because of a number of policy and legal barriers. And how we are trying to address this issue is to make sure that we build the capacities of both the NGOs, the civil society, as well as the government to be able to understand the issue. We are providing technical assistance to try and deal with this, but also we are ensuring that this issue is very much alive on the agenda of the relevant fora that are taking place on HIV. Well, I think the first bit of advice that I would give is I think it's very important to do your homework. The job descriptions for the resident coordinator, the designated official, the humanitarian coordinator, the UNDP resident representative, all of these are there. There's a number of resources that exist. You need to use them. I would also say it would be useful to try and talk, if this is possible, to as many colleagues as possible to understand what the job is about, what it entails, and also again, if you are able to do so, to talk to sitting resident coordinators to understand the dimensions of the job. I would then also say that it will be important for you to understand the mandates of the various agencies in terms of the roles that they play, in terms of their vision and the activities that they have on the ground. So at least a familiarization with some of the broad mandates of the agencies in the UN system are going to be very important. I think that you'll have to recognize that the job comes with some level of ambiguity. There is a lot of resources and tools available, there are comprehensive TORs, but I think some amount of ambiguity comes with the job and you need to be prepared to recognize it and be prepared to deal with it. At the same time, what I'd like to say is that in performing the job of a resident coordinator, you are not alone. You have the resources of the UN system and the support structure of the UN system, both at the country, regional and global levels behind you. And I think this is something important to bear in mind when considering the task of taking on the RC position. Thank you.